The Nintendo Entertainment System, or as it was called back in the day, Nintendo, the console that will always be in our hearts. Question is, will it always be in our rotation of games to play? And what about the kids who might not have any nostalgia for it? Would somebody think about the kids? Well, I did. And if parents are doing their job and following my guide to parenting, maybe they will have nostalgia for it. Here's the thing, as iconic as the NES is, it's hard to imagine that a day would ever come where people stopped talking about it. But there's a big difference between talking about something and wanting to have anything to do with it. I've always thought the NES would age into more of a fun grandpa type. Has some wacky ideas, perhaps a bit rough around the edges due to age, but above all else, does not care what others think. After all, the NES's game library is known for its I don't care if you think I'm too challenging difficulty that has toppled many a once proud gamers. I'll never forget what Ninja Gaiden did to me the first time I played it. So naturally, not everyone who goes to play NES games for the first time is going to have patience for their difficulty. That being said, it's likely going to be those of us who have been playing these games for a while now, for example, an entire lifetime, who will be leading the charge for which games continue to be talked about the most, and therefore, in all likelihood, played the most. When people look to try out classic Nintendo for the first time, there's a good chance they'll be looking to some of us for guidance. So folks, we gotta be ready. I always keep an eye out for anybody who gives off I might like playing Nintendo vibes, and when I spot a candidate, I pounce on them smoothly and swiftly. But if we're not recommending the right games, it could be a swing and a miss, which would be sad. Recommend a Bayou Billy and you might have just destroyed one potential NES fan. And that's another thing. It's not just about difficulty. Some games are considered difficult, but still good, like a Castlevania, while other games are considered difficult and bad, like a Bayou Billy. My apologies to any fans of Bayou Billy, but you're probably used to the fact not everybody likes it by now. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about what will get newcomers on board with the NES in the years to come, but that's not to dismiss those of us who have already been playing its games for years. And believe me, I understand that some of us may feel like if you ever enjoyed an NES game, then you will always enjoy it. That's how I generally feel about games. Even for some of the more notorious examples of video games that people say aged badly, like GoldenEye, I can still have a blast playing this game. But the reality is that there are some people who feel like certain games haven't aged well, and those tend to be the same games that aren't recommended for beginners. I mean, a game that has been called the NES's greatest game many times, The Legend of Zelda, gets criticized for being a game that hasn't aged well all the time, as much as some people may strongly disagree. But I tell ya, trying to get my friends' kids who really love Breath of the Wild to play the original Zelda on NES just ain't happening, and believe me, I've tried things to encourage it. So with all of this in mind, the games I'm going to be recommending are games that are not, I repeat, are not, one more time, are not the only games I think are good games for the system. These are just 5 games that I feel especially confident that I could fire up for years and years to come that would stand a good chance of being enjoyed by fans and first-timers alike of the Nintendo Entertainment System. So, with that said, the first game on my list is Punch-Out!, either the Mike Tyson version or the Mr. Dream version. Does anybody prefer the Mr. Dream version? Either way, this is a game that is not only considered one of the best games for the console, but also pretty darn memorable and iconic if you ask me. I mean, Mike Tyson himself will live on in the lore of celebrities, celebrity athletes, you name it, on and on and on. So the fact he had a video game that was actually pretty good is really going to allow this game to endure. Evander Holyfield's Real Deal Boxing just doesn't bring the mustard in quite the same way, does it? The game also has a nice policy when it comes to difficulty too, being, yeah, we'll kick your butt, but not until we've let you warm up and build up some confidence first. Not to mention, have some good solid fun, then we'll crush ya. Glass Joe, your first opponent, pretty much just lets you punch him. As long as you're aggressive, you'll win for sure. Definitely not a strategy that works in every NES game. But the farther you get into the game, the more you'll have to master good strategies and reflexes. What's cool about this game is how many different ways there are to beat each opponent. With all sorts of different little quirks and techniques players have discovered over the years, the game has a lot of depth. For example, did you know that if you successfully counter Bald Bull's charge attack, you can spot Luigi cheering in the crowd? Well, you didn't know that because I lied. But crazier things have happened in this game, making it a great game for the long haul. And as for the different stereotypes of the various boxers that the game has been called out for, well, hey, might warrant some "you can't say that, Grandpa" responses. And look at that, it's even missing teeth like a grandpa. Next game on my list is a bit of a curveball, The Adventures of Lolo, a game that not everybody knows, but most fans of the console have at least heard of it. What you have here is sort of a puzzle game in a way, but before hearing the word puzzle has you abandoning this video, seeing as some people don't find them very exciting, this game isn't a traditional puzzle game, such as something like Tetris. In this game, you are Lolo, trying to rescue Princess Lala. And that's right, because Lolo loves Lala, and Lala loves Lolo. So, now that I can assume you're motivated as all heck to get them back together, what do you need to do to make it happen, you may be wondering? Well, you're trying to collect all the hearts on screen, which allows you to open up a chest that contains a gem that allows you to open the door to the exit, just like in real life. You have a variety of tools at your disposal, as well as various elements you'll need to manipulate to solve each screen. And like Punch-Out, it starts out easy enough to get into, while providing more than enough challenge for those who want it the further you go into the game. With so many games on the NES requiring masterful twitch reflexes, I like bringing up at least one game that doesn't. Not that there aren't times where sharp twitch reflexes won't help you out, but a lot of this game is about using your brain. Wait a second, trying to get me to use my brain? What kind of dirty trick is that? Well, yeah, it's not how everyone likes their games. Next game on the list, we have Contra. How could we not? Well, I guess by just not. But again, with this game, we have a way to help mitigate the difficulty with a little old trick called not playing it and just saying it's too stupid hard. Wait, hold on a second, that's not the one. Ah, yes, the Konami code. For beginners, when 3 lives isn't enough, 30 lives probably still isn't enough, but it does provide a much thicker cushion, and is what makes me more likely to recommend this game for beginners over some of the other Contra games. One of the problems that a lot of NES games will present for beginners is that the first stage is almost just as difficult as the later stages, and while Contra certainly veers more towards that than either of the first 2 games I've mentioned so far, it does give a little bit more leeway than some of the worst offenders. Yeah, old Billy's been getting hammered in this video. That said, for those who haven't played the first stage of Contra 1,000 times like some of us have, it can be difficult. But besides the Konami code that will score you 30 lives, you can also play this game with a friend, possibly somebody really good at the game who recommended the game to begin with. So while your newcomer friend is burning through lives like hot butter, you can show him how it's done with all your fancy timed jumps and shooting. Plus, once you get a hang of this game at all, it can become very addictive, considered one of the best and most replayable NES games for a reason. Oh, and while we're at it, might as well throw Super C in there too. A great game for pretty much all the same reasons. Next game on the list is Mega Man 2. Again, considered one of the best games on the console, and while we're at it, you could throw in some of the other Mega Man games on the system too. And hey, throw in a banana as well, why not? I'd say this game's difficulty is maybe a notch below some of the harder NES games, while still providing plenty of challenge for those who want it, especially in the later stages. But whether it's a newcomer or a veteran, what makes the game highly accessible useful, not to mention fun, is the ability to tackle the stages in whatever order you please. I mean, just check out me doing the Quick Man stage here first like a fool. But if you want to go an easier route, you make sure to get Metal Man's Saw Blades weapon, which some would say is overpowered, some would say is fun, and some would say is both, and who cares? Next up, we have one of the more recognizable games on the system, Duck Hunt. I mean, why not recommend the game that got so many people into liking the system back in the day, as the one that could also do it moving into the future? Plus, even if you've played the heck out of this game, which a lot of longtime players have, it's always fun to go back for a quick few rounds, even if it's not a game you would marathon for 40 hours straight. Geez, imagine the condition you'd be in if you did that for this game. But Duck Hunt is novel and easy to play. You just aim the zapper, blast the ducks, and then get pissed off at the dog for laughing at you. Take out years of pent-up childhood aggression by beating the heck out of him in Super Smash Bros. And then hop right back to it. The only potential sticking point is the technology required for playing it, of which the most common solution is a CRT TV, aka big old tube TVs. Something not everyone has nowadays, let alone 30 years from now or goodness knows how long. But I'm hopeful there will be plenty of solutions for non-CRT displays by then that will allow a zapper to work, seeing as there already are at least some. I'm hoping for a lot of things for 30 years from now. People keep telling me the existence of nanners is in trouble, which is why I've been stocking up and steadily building a horde, much like Donkey Kong. Alright, now before I finish my list, real quick, as obvious as it is, better mention the Mario games, and what I'm curious about is if more people will end up playing the All-Stars versions instead? Probably a mix of both like they always have. But that does it for my list, and like I said, these are certainly not the only games I think are good games on the console. And while I catered my list towards both those who would be playing for the first time, as well as longtime fans, it's fair to say that there are plenty of more challenging games that are great games in spite of the challenge for those who are looking for games that put up a good fight. But in any case, I'd love to hear some of your arguments for why you think particular NES games stand a good chance of being loved for years and years to come. I tend to get inspired by your choices and answers, so I'm looking forward to it. So with that, leave your answer down below, and I will see ya in the next video. If there's one thing that retro gamers like, it's old stuff. I mean, hey, if you've got self-esteem, then there's one old thing you like right there. But whether you're an older retro gamer or a younger retro gamer, fingers crossed we're still getting more of those, it can be nice to know that the things you love will always be lovable. And the things you enjoy will always be enjoyable. It's like they always say, friends come and go, life changes, but a Sega Genesis game is forever. Or wait, maybe that's actually diamonds, but come on, can diamonds make you feel this? I don't think so. Yeah, why don't we just change that old saying to a Genesis game is forever? So long as it's not one of the ones that sucks, there we go, I think we're ready to get it trademarked. Now, for those of you who don't already know the drill for these games that will always be fun videos that I do, what's important to remember is that these are not the only games I think will always be fun, and it's not even my top 5 games. Rather, it's an opportunity for me to highlight 5 games that I feel especially confident will always have a place in gamers' hearts for years to come, and for reasons besides just being good games. That said, the Genesis is definitely one of those consoles where if you ever loved a game on it, except for maybe a few when you were a susceptible to loving garbage kid, but if you ever loved a Genesis game, there's a good chance you'll always love it, at least assuming you're a fan of 2D games, which have a reputation for aging well, and especially the 2D games from this era. It's just something I've noticed. Love for 2D games seems to endure endure. I've never heard of a full-grown adult waking up and saying, you know what, today's the day I tell my jerk boss to take a hike, and I think I've decided 2D sprite work looks ugly. In any case, think of the 5 games I mentioned more so as a celebration of those 5 games, and not as an insult towards whichever games aren't on the list, except for Captain Planet and the Planeteers, sorry. But with that said, the first game on my list is Rystar. I still get conflicting opinions on how you should pronounce the name, mostly from the tomato folks who still haven't given up the fight, but I finally decided I wanted to just call it Rystar because it sounds like Rising Star, and that makes me feel good. But regardless of how you pronounce it, you stand a good chance to enjoy playing it. What makes Rystar notable for a lot of people is the character's proximity to Sonic. I mean, just looking at his face, he looks like some sort of weird relative of Sonic, and that's because he sort of is in a way. When Sega was coming up with ideas for a mascot that eventually turned into Sonic, one of the ideas that they didn't use was eventually revisited and turned into Rystar, or Ristar, dang it, why do I always try to be so accommodating? Sonic was the speedy platformer that went in a vastly different direction than the platformers that had come before it. But have you ever wondered what would have happened if Sega made a more traditional platformer for the Genesis? Well, wonder no longer. Rystar is that game. Not to say it doesn't have some unique mechanics of its own. Hey, remember when we were talking about Rystar's face? Well, Rystar is a proud member of the Sega Genesis Attack Stuff with Your Face Club. That's right. Long arms and a face that's not afraid to take a beating. I can relate to Rystar. I think people will always find this game interesting in large part because Sonic has proven to be something people still find interesting, with no signs of stopping. And while the game design of Sonic is somewhat polarizing due to the speedy gameplay, Rystar might appeal to those who are looking for something that feels more like the 2D platformers they're already used to, but not to the point of why bother with this game. I'm telling you, mastering the arms and face mechanics in this game takes some getting used to, while also providing the main intrigue for the game, as the level design and challenges are all built around these mechanics. So it's a more traditional platformer than Sonic, but at the same time, there's really no other game like it, even to this day, and what I imagine will be many more days to come, making it a perfect game to represent the Genesis, in my opinion. But with that said, we can't talk about Sonic without talking about Sonic, which leads to my next game on the list, Sonic, and specifically Sonic 2. Although I should note that I'm using the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge here to play as Knuckles, just to be a rascal. Okay, so like I said, the gameplay style of classic Sonic is a little too untraditional for some folks, but overall, I still think a large chunk of people will be intrigued by it. There's nothing quite like these games. Oh, that's right, except for that one. What it comes down to is this. There will still be people playing the classic Sonic games, so long as there's still people playing Sega Genesis games, which, yep, until I'm dead, I can promise there will be at least one. I'm not sure there's ever been a console more synonymous with a specific game series, and yes, I understand people will debate that, but check this out. Couldn't even call it the Ultimate Genesis Collection. Had to call it Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection. And while yeah, that seems like a weird choice for a title regardless, even Nintendo, I doubt would ever call something Mario's Nintendo Collection, because Nintendo has a lot of other IPs that are pretty recognizable. So yeah, people are going to be curious about the Genesis Sonic games for a long time to come, and it certainly doesn't hurt that the games are considered great games. Although I will point out that the first Sonic game can feel a bit rough without the spin dash mechanic, a real game changer in Sonic 2, literally, and the original Sonic game has 3 acts per zone, which just feels too long. To me at least, I don't feel the original game is as compelling as 2, 3, and Knuckles, which some people will want to slap me for. I tell you what, I'll do it for you. If you really want to play Sonic 1 with the spin dash, there are certain releases that went back and added it in. Next game I want to talk about is Gunstar Heroes. You want to talk about a unique experience. Yes, there are other run-and-gun games, but no run-and-gun, or any game for that matter, that spikes your heart rate quite like this game, except for maybe DDR. A lot of you backed me up the first time I said this, but it's one of those games where you can only play so long because of how intense it is, and you notice your body's nervous system noticeably coming back down to a more calm state when you stop. Hey, actually, quick little idea for you, a hybrid game that mixes Gunstar Heroes with DDR. Playing that could send you to the hospital. It could be called Gunstar DDR. I really do need to go to the trademark office. Besides making great use of the Genesis hardware to push a lot of action on screen all at once, a lot of the game's soundtrack sounds like various high security facility alarm sounds orchestrated into different musical tracks, all of which sound really cool, by the way. The other thing is this: for how well known the run-and-gun genre was back in the late 80s and early 90s, there really aren't as many of them as you would think. Don't get me wrong, there are some other ones, and some really good ones at that, but not as many games as there were for some other genres like platformers. Point is, Gunstar Heroes sticks out as one of the greatest in the genre, and a very easy, quick recommendation for anybody looking for a good run-and-gun game, regardless of which era you're looking at. Alright, and while we're talking about blowing stuff up, why don't we talk about the Thunder Force games? 3 and 4 are both great, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick Thunder Force 4, also known as Lightning Force in the US, because why keep a cool name when you can change it and misspell it? So what do we have here? Well, a common candidate for the best shoot-'em-up of the 16-bit era. Not to mention, one of the most banging soundtracks you'll ever hear. Seriously, just listen to the song I've linked to in a pinned comment down below, and for some people, that alone will make you want to play this game. I'm not kidding. And am I someone who would ever stretch the truth? But Lightning Force is one of those games that just feels like a Genesis game. Yep, grippy spot on the back, label covering the front, but more than that, it's just got that gritty aesthetic that the Genesis seemed to pride itself on, which fits perfectly into a shoot-'em-up, and this game exemplifies the genre as well as any. The final game I'd like to talk about is Shinobi 3. Oh, by the way, Rocket Knight Adventures is just a given. I mean, right? Like suggesting food as something to eat? But Shinobi 3, I've always thought of this game as one of the better examples of a game that is easy to get into, but also has a lot there for those who want to invest more into it. Some of the people who play this game never even use the entire moveset available to you, which can be very useful, not to mention speed things up. Seriously, I'd suggest it though. Imagine if you thought all you could do was walk, and then discovered running. Holy smokes, this is so much quicker! This game is also one of the first games I think of when it comes to blending an arcade-style game with home console sensibilities, which makes sense seeing as Shinobi has roots in the arcade. Basically, just take the accessibility and instant appeal of arcade-style games, tweak the difficulty to be just tough enough, flesh everything out a bit more, including the stages, weapons, items, moveset, and then make the game last longer than a typical arcade game would. Jackpot. That's Shinobi 3 for you, and why this game is, in my opinion, a perfect Sega Genesis game. A console whose identity was a home console with arcade sensibilities. But there we have it for the 5 games I wanted to highlight in this video. And again, a friendly reminder, this doesn't mean I think these are the only 5 Genesis games that will always be fun. If there's a game I didn't mention that you'd like to highlight, please do so in the comments. Odds are, it's a game that I also love. I've played this console a lot and tend to agree with a lot of the good things people like to say about it. So, with that, leave a comment with the game you'd like to highlight or any other thoughts you may have, and I will see ya in the next video. Hey, so you know how there's certain things that used to be fun, but now they're not? Like, for example, life. That's a bummer. Hate it when that happens. Well, lucky for us, some things can be fun forever, like the Super Nintendo. Bills, responsibilities, a lack of free time, all the garbage that us human beings have to deal with, the Super Nintendo has avoided all of it. Having maintained its playful spirit for all these years, this thing is just as frisky as it ever was, and serves as a great resource to tip the scales of life more in the favor of fun. So, while sure, I may not be able to get a neighborhood Super Soaker battle going like I used to, I can still play my Super Nintendo, and in case you never thought of it, yes, you can too. You're welcome. What's also fortunate is that we live in a time when access to Super Nintendo games is greater than it's ever been. So, whether it's on your phone, your computer, your Nintendo Switch, some random disc that came with a used Sega Dreamcast you bought, or what have you, where there's a will, there's a way, and probably not even much of a will. But which games will people be playing 30 years from now? Well, the Super Nintendo is one of those consoles that many would tell you, myself included, that if a game was ever fun, you will probably always enjoy it, as the games have aged beautifully, thanks in large part to the gorgeous 2D visuals that the overwhelming majority of Super Nintendo games utilized, which have aged nicely and have remained very kind to your old set of peepers, whereas some of those early 3D games maybe not so kind to your eyes. But for Super Nintendo games, I'd say more than kind, they're downright generous. For fans of sprite work, the games still look great, but it's obviously not just about looks, they're fun to play too. Ah yes, fun. Now there's something that never stops being fun. And while most Super Nintendo games could be placed in the enjoy it once, enjoy it forever category, I'm going to be mentioning 5 games that I feel are uniquely qualified, of which I'll explain my reasoning for. Speaking of which, first game I want to mention is about as obvious as it gets, Super Mario World. It simply has to be mentioned. Yeah, I understand it's a safe choice, which, funny enough, some people actually hold against it. Kind of reminds me of how people say drinking water is an uninspired choice for a drink. You can always spice it up with a little something something though. Not a safe choice anymore, but by gosh, is this a unique experience. Point is, there's nothing wrong with an old-fashioned glass of water in Super Mario World. It'll leave you well hydrated and having a good time with the game as timeless as they come. If there was ever a game that will always have its fans, this is it. If you're looking for a unique approach to the game, you could, you could do that, but I would suggest trying to find all the secret exits to the stages. They lead to special extra stages, and it's a lot of fun to try to find everything in the game. Ton of depth and replay value in this game that a person could easily not even realize is there. Kind of like how I keep a banana stashed behind my Saturn games. Who could have ever guessed? This game is often considered the apex of 2D Mario games. Well, either this or Super Mario Bros. 3, and I do wonder if Nintendo will ever make a fully fledged 2D sprite-based Mario game ever again. Depending when you watch this, maybe they already have, but if they never do, then this game, along with Super Mario Bros. 3, might always have a special place in Mario's library of games as that game you should play if you want to play a 2D Mario game. Naturally, this game is for fans of 2D platformers, of which there are many of on this console, and I'd say it's a good way to find out if you truly love the genre or not. It's about as good of a suggestion as you can get to gauge your love of 2D platformers. Some would say it's a great way to gauge your value as a human being, too. But the Super Nintendo isn't just about side-scrolling 2D platformers, and if you're looking for a game in a different genre that gets talked about far less than Super Mario World, my suggestion would be Goof Troop. Don't let the fact that this is a licensed game fool you. If you got a problem with this game, then you got a problem with Shinji Mikami. You know, the guy who worked on the Resident Evil games, or at the very least, you've got a problem with one of the earlier games he worked on. And while not as terrifying as the Resident Evil games in a traditional sense, what is terrifying is the amount of fun that you can have playing this game with a friend. The type of fun that'll make whatever you do immediately after seem like garbage by comparison. This game was made by Capcom and kind of feels like a precursor to the multiplayer Zelda games, some of the most fun co-op games there are. Now, you can play this game in one-player mode, and I'd say that it is still fun, but two-player mode is what you want. So make sweet with your sweetie pie, call your long-lost friend you burned bridges with and repair those bridges, tell your kids to take a break from that hullabaloo they call homework, and if you don't have kids, then, well, maybe have kids. Whatever it takes to play this game with two players is gonna be worth it. In fact, if you've ever watched my list of the best co-op games for Super Nintendo, you'll know that I actually have this game ranked as the best co-op game for the system, no small feat, making it a game I can see myself playing for years to come. Something everyone may not agree with, but that's how I feel about this game. The problem I find I often run into when trying to play older games cooperatively with people is that they understandably kinda suck at the game. Contra can be amazing in co-op, but it can feel like being fed to the wolves for someone who isn't already well versed with the game. Goof Troop is very easy to get into for anybody, while still offering plenty of challenge, a lot of which is mitigated to what the heck do I do difficulty. Nothing that'll make you slam your head against the wall though. Hey, why do people do that, by the way? Curious what all the buzz was about? I gave it a try and all it did was just really hurt. In Goof Troop, you'll have to solve block puzzles as well as other puzzles that require utilizing certain items at certain times that, much like Four Swords Adventures, you can only pick up one at a time. This gives your buddy a chance to contribute to your progression with their brain and not just their twitch reflexes. Not that the baddies in this game won't try to get you. Okay, so Goof Troop is a game like Zelda, and next I have another game that is also very Zelda-like. Zelda. Specifically, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, a game for fans of puns, sure, but also one of the most loved games in the franchise. And again, similar to the point I made about Super Mario World, this game could very well wear the crown for best 2D sprite-based Zelda game for a long time, especially considering that Nintendo will likely want to keep exploring where the series can go in the 3D realm, and when they do make top-down Zelda games, they tend to not really bother with many sprites. Point is, A Link to the Past is special and seems like it will always have a reputation of the great Zelda game made by Nintendo that uses sprites, something that Zelda fans will always be interested in. They pretty much got this game perfect. Most of the criticisms I've seen seem to come from hyper-analyzing, a great way to find a problem with anything, by the way. Did you know multiple different people have gotten bothered with me for calling the PlayStation 1 instead of just the PlayStation? What can I say? I'm sick. But point is, most fans feel like A Link to the Past pretty much just nailed it, perfected what a 2D Zelda game could be. Funny enough, the next game on my list is one where I feel like the most common criticism it gets could actually work in its favor. Super Castlevania 4. Don't ever forget to say the super, although, dirty little secret of mine, sometimes in the comfort of my own home, I'll just call it Castlevania 4 to myself. I told ya I was sick. You see, with Castlevania 4, fans of the classic games in the series will often say that it's too easy, which is often in comparison to the older NES games known for being pretty difficult and destroying noobs. For a lot of people, including younger generations, who I'd like to see playing these older games, it can just be too much, and a chance at getting them into classic Castlevania is unfortunately lost. In fact, quick little story for you, I fired up the original Castlevania on NES for my friends' kids, and they really enjoyed while watching me play it. As soon as they tried to play it themselves, it was rage. Maybe I should try a door-to-door business where I do some house calls to have the younger generations watch me play Castlevania to get them on board with older games. Castlevania seems like a popular enough franchise that there will always be people interested in trying out the earliest games in the series, but public service aside, I just think Super Castlevania will be a great game for people to go back to for years to come. I mean, it's often considered one of the best Castlevania games regardless of all that. It has a ton of cool levels, each with their own unique design, giving a great taste of the Castlevania world and aesthetic. And it appears as if, though, it might be the only Castlevania game that will ever offer a whip that you can attack with in 8 directions, which is a lot of fun to do. Alright, and for my 5th game on the list, we have Mega Man X. You'll start to notice a theme here, as I once again have a 2D sprite-based game in an iconic franchise, and once again, a game in the series that many consider to be the best. Although, with a series that has as many games as Mega Man does, I have just a handful of them here, opinions vary all over the place on which game is the best. But the original Mega Man X certainly has a positive reputation, and perhaps more important than anything, it has a winning formula that was executed very well. You know, it's funny how many games on the Super Nintendo pulled off what I feel are perfect versions of what a 2D game in their respective franchises could be. It's almost as if it's one of the best consoles ever made or something. Oh yeah, lots of people do say that about it. I love how distinct the levels are in this game, and in classic Mega Man fashion, discovering and finding out how to best utilize all the different weapons is a blast, figuring out which weapons work best against which enemies and bosses. Plus, finding all the different little power-ups hidden through the stages gives the game a bit of a Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night exploratory vibe. The power-ups, such as having extra life tanks, can make a massive difference too. Alright, but that about does it for the 5 games I wanted to highlight. Again, remember that I'm not saying these are the only Super Nintendo games that will always be fun. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the RPGs, and this isn't necessarily a list of the 5 games that I think are the best. These are just 5 games that I chose to highlight. If there's a Super Nintendo game you love, I probably love it too. I'm a pretty big fan of the console. But with that said, I would still enjoy hearing which Super Nintendo game you would like to highlight. Whoa, easy there, Sparky, not that kind of highlight. But what can I say? I love hearing people talk about the games they love. So with that, leave a comment down below, and I will see ya in the next video. The Neo Geo had 2D visuals so ahead of its time that they never fell behind the times, unlike that one uncle of yours jokes. The Neo Geo spotted everyone else over 2 decades to design 2D visuals that were up to par, and in my opinion, well, if the Neo Geo isn't still the best, one could certainly make the argument for it. In fact, I will. The amount of detail, in addition to the superb animation you'll find, combined with the overall style, still makes for some of the best looking 2D games, and for me, some of the prettiest things I've ever laid my eyes upon, period. And trust me, I've seen some beautiful things in my time. If you wanted to make the argument that every single Neo Geo game will always be fun forever, I wouldn't stop you. Then again, I'm also somebody who once failed to stop someone who said pie is better without ice cream on it, so maybe I'm not one to stop things. In any case, what I am going to do is take the time to highlight 5 games that I feel are especially qualified. Oh, and remember, lots of different ways to play Neo Geo games without collecting them. There's far more impressive things to be collecting anyways. But with that, what better game to start with than Metal Slug? Well, how about Metal Slug 3? But while all the Metal Slugs are great, I do want to focus on the first one because it's the game that feels the most like a traditional run and gun game to me. And if you think you've played good run and gun games before with your Gunstar Heroes and your Contra, well, you actually have. Those are really good games. But if you want even more awesomeness, you gotta try out Metal Slug. The later Metal Slug games added a lot of crazy stuff that, don't get me wrong, is mostly awesome, but there's a certain charm to the first game being played primarily on foot, with, of course, the tanks you get into every now and then, appropriately called Metal Slugs. And what a cool name for a game. I mean, I could have made it cooler, but hey, still pretty good. What makes the series so well known is all here in the first game. The insane amount of detail in the sprite work, excellent animation, and fun variety of all the usual suspects, weapons, enemies, bosses, and, unique to Metal Slug, all the funny little jokes that the game slips into the stages, some of which you have to really be paying attention for in order to spot. As a matter of fact, if you like the style of my videos with bits of humor sprinkled in, you'll appreciate the approach taken with Metal Slug. Alright, next game on my list, and don't tell Tetris, but my favorite puzzle game of all time, Bust-A-Move. Called Puzzle Bobble in other parts of the world, for some reason the US wanted it to sound like some sort of dancing game. In fact, there's an actual dancing game called Bust-A-Groove that probably bitterly took its name after finding out Bust-A-Move was already taken by a puzzle game. I think what this game nails as a puzzle game is the sensory feedback it gives you. The sound of the bubbles popping combined with the visual effect never gets old. I like how once you get rid of a color, it never comes back, providing an added incentive to clear out colors when you can. Really hate a certain color for some random reason? Well, then this game's for you. But perhaps my favorite part of this puzzle game is being able to clear a ton of bubbles by popping bubbles that other colors are hanging underneath. This sets up for some massive momentum shifts and gives the game an extra layer to consider as you're playing because of the risk-reward associated with it. Wait too long and it can backfire on ya, like not brushing your teeth. So long, teeth. Might be one of the only puzzle games I can think of where aiming is a big factor too. The challenge of getting good at aiming, combined with going for high-reward shots, not to mention the generally cheery and colorful aesthetic of the game, make this my favorite puzzle game to recommend because, well, it's my favorite puzzle game to play. Somebody told Tetris, didn't they? Next game on my list is Baseball Stars 2. Still my favorite baseball game to play, not that that's much of an honor, but probably my favorite arcade sports game to play as well, although NBA Hang Time is certainly in there too. The goal of any great arcade sports title is to simplify things while adding a little bit of flair and exaggerating the fun parts, kinda like my dance moves. Ever try to play a more realistic sports game when you're used to the more arcadey ones? It feels like trying to run backwards. Baseball Stars 2 has a great style to it as well. The players all look like they've been chomping on steroids. They'll snap their bats when they strike out. They'll taunt the pitcher after attempting to pick them off, and sometimes a batter, after being hit by a pitch, will rush the pitcher and actually punch him out, which then forces the pitcher to leave the game. And having fresh pitchers is a vital resource in this game. Very clever way of rewarding the player with style. Now, as simple as the game is, it does still allow you to do some more complicated things, like telling the runners to advance extra bases or go back to the bases they came from, all with the press of a single button while holding a direction on the stick that corresponds to the direction of the proper base. I love the very vivid use of color in this game too. Just a fantastic game. Makes me think of playing arcade games in a pizza parlor back in the day after a Little League game, but playing this arcade game ends up being 10 times more fun than the real-life baseball you were just playing. Next game on my list is Neo Drift Out. probably the least well-known game on my list, but you know what they say about games that are less well-known? Less people know about them. So I feel it necessary to talk about it. The game could be described as an isometric racer, which might sound like bad news to some people, but the game pulls it off well, giving you just the right amount of time to react to upcoming turns, mastering the turns, and avoiding the obstacles in order to shave seconds off your time is a lot of fun, and I find the level of challenge to be pretty much perfect, and depending how good at it you are, it only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to play, so when deciding between either playing this game or doing something productive, do both by playing this game. One that always comes as a really quick recommendation from me. In fact, barely even needed to say much about it, and I'm moving on to the next game, which is Shock Troopers. Oh, how I love Shock Troopers. This game has always felt like the pinnacle of top-down run-and-gun games, of which there aren't very many, at least not as many as there should be. I find this game makes a great complement to the Metal Slug games for the platform because it plays sort of similarly, blasting away everything with some satisfying pixel work to animate all of it, but operating from a different perspective. You're going to want to master rolling around in this game. No, not you, your character. Otherwise, you will die a lot. Defense is key. It's easy to get fixated on hammering away at the fire button, but you'll last much longer if you prioritize defense first. And while the game doesn't have nearly the level of nuance in it as the Metal Slug games, I mean, what does, I still think it does a great job of mixing up where you are and what you're doing. You can even select different paths through the game. Some of the bosses are really hard, but it's an appreciated challenge. Also, it should come as no surprise that the game has bananas you can pick up to replenish your life bar. I mean, sure seems like a lot of great games have bananas in them. What I really love is some of the weapons you pick up in this game. You have a limited amount of ammo, so you're constantly trying to make the best use of good weapons while you have them, as well as keeping an eye on additional weapon pickups to grab as you run low on life. Like Metal Slug, this is a fantastic game to play with 2 players as well. Highly recommended. And with that, those are the 5 Neo Geo games I wanted to highlight. Certainly not the only Neo Geo games that will always be fun though, so be sure to write in the comments which games you would suggest. Odds are they'll be games that I've played a bunch of and can enthusiastically agree with you on. Like the fighting games, of which it's poetic justice that some of you probably want to punch me for not talking about. So leave a comment or metaphorical punch in the face down below with your suggestions or thoughts, and I will see ya in the next video. The Sega Saturn, and when it comes to consoles with a mascot that beats up random kids to get them to play it, this one ranks up near the top. But while beating up random kids is one option, I prefer a different approach, recommending games. You're welcome, kids. Plus, we gotta look out for the kids. It's up to them to carry on the legacy of these older games. And in order for the kids to care about Sega Saturn, we need to care. And the best way for us to care is to get excited about the games. How good it feels to press the reset button ain't gonna do it. Although, I'm telling you, don't sleep on the reset button. It is really nice. But right away, we gotta address the price of Saturn games because people always bring it up, and for good reason. It's too much. Well, lucky for me, my video is titled Saturn Games That Will Always Be Enjoyable, not always be affordable. However, I will still draw some attention towards games that are on the more affordable side for those who are looking to play physical copies. That said, as time goes on, hopefully it will become easier for the future generations to play these games as the methods to play them evolves. And goodness forbid Sega themselves would just make them more easily available. First up, we got Panzer Dragoon 2, which people also like to call either Panzer Dragoon 2 or the second one. The price of the US copy sucks now, but a Japanese copy is much more reasonable. And oh, by the way, this is going to be a theme for this system. Get yourself an action replay cart that allows you to play imports, as well as provide the system with the extra RAM it uses for some games, as well as providing you with more storage for game saves. Most people who own a Saturn have one of these. Most people who own a Saturn also have a love for Panzer Dragoon, including the series as a whole. The third game in the series has become either famous or infamous, depending how you look at it, over the years for its high price, which causes a lot of people to automatically assume it's the best game in the series, which maybe it is or maybe it isn't, but either way, I feel confident that a lot of you would enjoy Panzer Dragoon zwei more, because it's a rail shooter, while Saga is an RPG, and the RPG genre can be very hit or miss with people. Take me, for example. Skies of Arcadia, hit. Saga Frontier, miss. Being a rail shooter makes this game very easy to get into, I feel. Very heavy on the action, solid mechanics, and fantastic artistic direction make this one of the best ones there is. If you compare it to the original Panzer Dragoon, and yes, the Japanese Mobius art be darned, apparently they wanted the cover art to look bad, in which case they should have come to me. I'm really good at that. But the main thing that differentiates Panzer Dragoon zwei from its predecessor is that you get a charged up attack you can use, which is the green meter in the bottom left and charges up as you shoot enemies. So it all works together nicely. You'll forget about it, and then remember you can use it when you need it most, like a plunger. Next game on the list is the 2D fighting game made by Capcom, Vampire Savior. Although, because it's my video, I'm gonna cheat and just recommend pretty much any of the Capcom 2D fighting games for the system. Something the Saturn excelled at, and one of the biggest ways to take advantage of having one. I wanted to highlight Vampire Savior though, because just look at it. It's hard to imagine many people seeing this and not thinking it looks cool. The style, the character design, the detail in the sprite work and frames of animation. This is 2D sprite work at darn near its best. And I think it's pretty impressive that decades after its release, the Saturn is still home to some of the best looking 2D games I've ever seen, with what I'd argue is still one of the best controllers for playing 2D games. This thing has some major get off my lawn vibes against newer D-pads. Naturally, if you've ever played Street Fighter games before, then you'll be able to jump into the action no problem. The characters have similar inputs and special moves to Street Fighter, since it was also made by Capcom, not that it hasn't stopped other companies besides Capcom from just copying this as well. But if you enjoy Street Fighter and want to shake things up, Vampire Savior is probably gonna be your jam. Next game on the list is Virtua Cop 2, although Virtua Cop 1 is also a lot of fun. Have you ever wanted to take a bite out of crime? Probably not, because that's super dangerous, but in this game you can be top dog, stopping all the criminals by blasting them dead in their tracks, along with a few random innocent civilians who pop out at the wrong time. To play this game, the game itself isn't too expensive, but it's intended to be used with a Saturn Stunner, which requires you to have a CRT TV in order to use it, which for some of you is no problem, praise be the CRT, but for others needing a CRT might just be a deal breaker, in which case you can just not use any of that and play the game with a regular controller. Still a lot of fun if you ask me, but the Stunner is certainly ideal. Good old-fashioned Sega arcade-style gameplay is what you'll get. What's nice about this game is that it actually puts a target around each enemy you need to aim for. This labeling might seem like pointing out the obvious, but I use a similar technique with my wife, and it always serves as a nice reminder. And don't worry, the targets on the enemies doesn't make the game too easy. Just trust me, this game is harder than it looks. Certain targets targets pop up and close faster than you'd think, at which point they will fire at you. You have really got to be ready. To add to the fun, you can get a second Saturn stunner for 2-player action, or even just to dual wield by yourself if you really want to. But if you're looking for an even better method of dual wielding, stunner and a nanner. Take a bite out of crime and a bite out of banana. Next game on the list is Tsukyuga Rentai, or as some people like to call it, Suki for short, or as other people like to call it, I don't know, but it's a good game. Again, I'm going to cheat and just recommend shoot 'em ups in general for the system, which, much like fighting games, are a genre that the system excelled at. Since the genre has heavy roots in Japan, and the Saturn was popular in Japan, the Saturn got a lot of them during a time when video games allowing you to blast everything on screen was considered a thing gamers definitely like. How we evolved from that to every other game having a horse you ride for hours on end, I'll never know, but I find going back to the games that allow you to blast everything on screen is refreshing. A lot of good ones on the Saturn, but what makes this game unique is the lock-on system it has, not to be confused with Layer Section, aka Galactic Attack. You're able to spread out a cone, web, or whatever you want to call it, and any enemies within range will be automatically locked onto. You then release the button, and homing projectiles will be sent out. You do still have a standard firing function as well, but you'll want to use the lock-on mechanic as much as you can. I really like the stage design in this game, and you always feel like the stages are constantly evolving and or transitioning as you make your way through them. The soundtrack is beautiful, done by the same composer who worked on the Radiant Silvergun soundtrack. The guy clearly knows what he's doing in providing music that is more atmospheric. As you'd imagine, the game is pretty hard, but it does give you a lot of credits to work with, so you can build up your skill over time. I really like popping this one in every once in a while to see if I can make it farther than I got the last time. Having this game is a real comfort for me. Life is unpredictable, but the Sega Saturn will always have great shoot 'em ups. Alright, and the final game on my list is Guardian Heroes, made by famed developer Treasure. They hit on pretty much every game they ever made. They're a developer you can trust. I ever get stranded on the side of the road? Forget a tow truck, I'm calling Treasure. Even the Ronald McDonald game is good. Known for unique takes on already loved concepts, this game is Treasure's take on the beat-em-up genre. Setting it apart, among other things, is the ability to move between 3 different planes. The screen can get really busy, so it can take a bit of getting used to, but a lot of the appeal comes from how much action the game can have going on all at once. You have multiple characters to choose from, each of which play vastly different from one another, with a variety of different attacks. By the way, great job by Sega to spring for full-color manuals on this one, huh? Yikes. With some characters leaning more towards the magical attacks you can use. The only bummer is that the game does have a lot of text that interrupts the game, but some people like the story, so maybe it's not such a bummer to everyone. Either way, it's good to know what you're in for. I was told Ready Player One is great for fans of video games, but wait a minute, this thing wants me to read? Regardless, a great game for fans of beat-em-ups who want to try something a little different. But with that does it for the 5 games I wanted to recommend, although, like I said, it's a lot more than 5 games when you add in all the shoot 'em ups and fighting games. Plus, there are plenty of other great games for it, many of which I'll probably be recommending in future videos or have already mentioned in past videos, as I'm really familiar with this system's games. I'm telling you, I've gone through the Saturn's library like a perfectly ripe banana. In any case, would love to hear what you think of the games I mentioned, as well as which additional games you would recommend. So leave a comment down below with your thoughts as always, and I will see ya in the next video. Something that I hear said a lot about the original PlayStation is that it has some ugly looking games that didn't age well. In fact, you just heard me say it right now, but just because something isn't great to look at doesn't mean it can't still bring you some enjoyment. Just ask my friends. Plus, the idea that PS1 games aren't nice to look at is a bit misleading. I stared at my copy of Crash Bandicoot 2 for like 3 straight hours the other day. But even besides that, the PlayStation has a whole boatload of 2D games that are not only not bad to look at, but perhaps some of the most beautiful games you'll ever see. Sometimes I swear that besides my wife, there ain't nothing as purty as the original Rayman. We're talking 65,000 eye-popping colors here, folks. I mean, how do that many colors even exist? I made a list of all the ones I know and only got to like 9. And I can't even guarantee all of them are eye-popping. But even when we look at the 3D games on the PlayStation, the games that back in the day had us saying, oh boy, but nowadays have us saying, oh boy. Luckily, these games knew their limits. Well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them did. Metal Gear Solid didn't try to be some sort of open-world desert hiking simulator. It knew its limitations. The levels are tightly designed. The game predominantly uses a fixed camera and radar system that gives the game a feel reminiscent of how older games, that's right, even older than the PS1, would play, and that just, well, works. As a result, many fans of the series will still to this day tell you it's one of, if not the best game in the series. Then take a look at a game like Resident Evil 2. Pre-rendered backgrounds, baby. I wouldn't mind having some of these back these days. These looked really nice. Final Fantasy did the same thing. It's almost like the good developers are the ones who know what they're doing. The point is, there's plenty to enjoy on the original PlayStation. There's a really good quote that I can't remember exactly where I heard it, but I'd like to share it with all of you now. It goes, "For those who cannot find anything to play on the PlayStation, you're a doofus." And now I remember, the person who said that was me. But nah, you'll still be alright if you don't enjoy the console. That said, let's dig into the first game I want to talk about, although if you've been paying attention, I've already talked about a few. Rayman, that's right, can't just talk about all the colors it has. This game feels like a classic 16-bit game gone wild, which would make sense because at one point it was actually supposed to be a Super Nintendo game, and we all know how those tend to turn out pretty good. But the thing is, in a lot of ways, it's very different from a lot of the 16-bit classic platformers. For starters, it's on a CD, and so you'll get CD quality audio that goes for more of an understated, mood-inspired, atmospheric feel. The other thing is that this game moves pretty slowly, definitely slower than most platformers I've played. You eventually get the ability to run, but it's the last power in the game that you unlock, and unless you're an expert, you're probably not going to want to use it much anyways, because you better believe it, this game has a reputation for being really difficult. Don't let Rayman's slap-happy face fool ya. Funny enough, I've actually just reached the very last stage of this game. I'm not showing you footage of it here, it's way too stressful to be capturing for footage. But when I think of how bad I was at this game when I first got it, it feels like going back to the beginning of my life when I didn't even know how to walk, but look at me now. The stride, the confidence, I'm downright cocky at this point. I've beaten the Space Mama boss encounter. Take that, anyone who's ever gotten through law school. You want to get through this game and you want some advice from me? Well, quick little trick for you. And it's almost like a mind trick. What throws a lot of people off in this game is how much hang time you have on your jumps, messing up a lot of the timing for your jumps, causing you to die a lot, and that's kinda sad. But in the ultimate case of turning that frown upside down, what we're going to do is change that disadvantage into an advantage by utilizing all that time you have to land to guide Rayman to exactly where you want to go. And sure, there's still a lot of precision required in addition to quick reflexes, especially when you need to grab or punch things in the air, but changing your mindset in that way really helped me to get a lot better at the game. And if you're curious, I've yet to even attempt the very final stage of the game because I don't want it to end. That way I've always got something to look forward to. Next game is Ape Escape. They're not monkeys, but the game still involves bananas. And you know what that means? I am in. Lucky for me, there's a lot of great games with bananas in them, and you can add this one to the list. I've given Sony grief in the past for not actually developing a lot of the games that people associate with the PlayStation brand, but this game was made by their often underappreciated Japan studio, and being the sucker for games developed in Japan that I am, this is yet another example of a game I really like. Have you ever been sitting alone holding a DualShock 1 controller thinking, gosh, I wish I had a reason to use this second analog stick for a PS1 game? Well, your prayers have been answered. Ape Escape makes for such a quick recommendation because it's so easy to get into. The premise is simple. A bunch of apes have escaped and, well, you're not about to stand for that. You gotta track them all down and catch them in what ends up amounting to a colorful platformer with various obstacles, a wide array of gadgets to use, and fun environments to navigate in order to do so. Caught an ape? You sure did. It's satisfying, triumphant, and addicting. Time to catch the next one. What always cracks me up is when sometimes you'll be chasing apes and they'll drop banana peels behind them as if that's going to deter me. Only fueling the fire there, buddy. How do you think my wife gets me out of the house on time when we need to go somewhere? When I see banana peels in Mario Kart, I get so excited I go right for them. And sure, I slip, but it only makes me pursue you all the more intensely with the hope you have more. Next game I'd like to talk about is Raiden Project, which, funny enough, much like Rayman, was also a launch game, and much like Rayman, is also a game with 2D visuals. In fact, it's two games that use 2D visuals, as you get both Raiden as well as Raiden 2. You'll notice I have the Japanese version, and that's because it allows you to rotate the screen while also rotating the controls without the need for a Game Shark, and preserving the game's native full resolution. You can also install your toilet paper the wrong way as a little mind trick that makes you use less, but of course, you don't have to do any of this. The Raiden games have always felt like some of the poster children of the shoot-'em-up genre, and seems to be one of the series that even people who aren't super into shoot-'em-ups have at least heard of. Like a lot of the more accessible shoot-'em-ups, this game will build up your confidence in its early stages in order to prepare you for the more stiff challenges that are waiting for you later on. And much like life itself, they're challenges you may not be able to get past. I've always loved the explosion animations in these games, whether it be the bombs you can drop or the enemies themselves blowing up. But I tell you what, if you want to see that happen, you have gotta be ready to do quick dodges. So get those thumb quickness exercises ready. Bullets come at a moment's notice in this game, and if I had advice, it would be this. Watch out for the sneaky enemies on the ground that you don't see. I'm telling you, they're usually the ones to get you. Okay, and the last game I'd like to talk about would be Symphony of the Night. This is one of those games that seems to only get even more popular as the years go by. Things change. In 1997, some people were saying that Spice Girls was the greatest music group of all time. Some trends were just not meant to last. Sadly, Symphony of the Night was overlooked back in 1997. But you want to talk about the ultimate tortoise and the hare story? GoldenEye is still taking a nap at mile 2, and you can call Symphony of the Night a tortoise at the finish line. And I know what you're you're thinking right now, how dare you insult Spice Girls? Symphony of the Night is often credited as being part of what started the trend of what some like to call the Metroidvania genre, or what others like to call also the Metroidvania genre, but just more reluctantly because even though they don't like the term, we haven't really come up with an alternative yet. Even with all the games to follow in its footsteps, even within the Castlevania series itself, many fans of the genre will still tell you that this is the absolute best one, yet to be surpassed. The soundtrack in this game, hard to beat. The intricate castle you get to explore, hard to top. The enemies you face, amazing sprite design, and the voice acting stands by itself. And there we have it, some of the games I wanted to highlight, though to be clear, certainly not the only games that I think will always be fun. I own a lot more games than what I showed here, and I plan on playing all of them until I'm dead. Speaking of which, I might want to get a move on finally beating Rayman here. But with that said, I'd be curious to hear what you all think of the games that I chose, as well as which games some of you would have picked. So with that, leave a comment down below, and I will see ya in the next video. The Nintendo 64, not everybody loves it. In fact, some folks find hating on it to be more lovable than actually loving it. Well, what if I told you that you can have your N64 and hate it too? That's right, you can hate the N64 overall while still enjoying some of the games, and it's my job to guess what those games might be by recommending them to you. And don't worry, I understand you've got a reputation to uphold, so it'll be our little secret. The games I'll be suggesting are all games that I feel will stand the test of time, something that this particular console, being one of the earliest to emphasize 3D games, tends to come under scrutiny for quite often. Let's just say certain games are a little more insecure about their age than others. I've caught GoldenEye doing some light reading. I find the N64 can be a tricky console to talk about because of a lot of the sentimental feelings people have looking back on it as well. One of my wife's friends literally took out her camera to take a picture of a Nintendo 64 controller when checking out my game room, to which I said, whoa, if you're taking pictures, the good stuff is right here, snap away. Okay, so these earlier 3D games, how do you sell somebody on these? Well, for starters, how about by not, with my first game not being a 3D game, or at least not entirely 3D. The game is Mischief Makers, made by the developer Treasure, known for making mini-games that are not 3D, but more important than that, games that are not bad. In fact, quite good. Mischief Makers is a game for the Nintendo 64 that I remember renting back in the day and had no idea how to play it well as a kid. I just wanted to keep giving it a chance because of how frisky the title of the game is. Sadly, the same didn't work out for Rascal Racers, but it's been a real treat to come back to Mischief Makers as an adult. It plays on a 2D plane and has a lot of sprite work, so I think it will satiate most fans of 2D games in that regard. Also, this game is one of the exceptions where you can use the N64's D-pad as your primary way of controlling your character. So, for the people who hate cramming their hands onto the middle and right handles, this one's for you. Slide that left hand on over to the left handle and let those hands breathe. In typical Treasure fashion, the game is rather unconventional. The controls and your character's abilities feel unique from any other game I've ever played, with the most unique mechanic being that you can shake stuff. Why are there not more games where you can shake stuff? Learning how to navigate your character through the game may take a bit of getting used to, but it's really not so bad, and once you do, I feel the game's structure is actually pretty straightforward in a lot of ways and easy to get into. Basically, just a lot of using your abilities to navigate the obstacles and puzzle elements in each stage until you reach the end. I really can't recommend this one enough for fans of 2D platformers, and more specifically puzzle platformers, looking for a unique take on the genre. Next game is NBA Hang Time. Now, right away, some people's first reactions might be, what is this? Some kind of NBA Jam ripoff? And I would know because that's what I thought years ago. But no, it's actually the sequel to NBA Jam. It just couldn't be called NBA Jam because the rights to the name were acquired by Acclaim. But the original development team behind NBA Jam was behind this game, and that's what matters because the result is a solid game. Because NBA Jam is one of those games that sure feels like just about everybody likes it, to the point it would almost seem weird if somebody said they didn't like it. Like laughing. Yeah, I laugh sometimes, but I gotta tell ya, not a fan. But for fans of NBA Jam and laughing, NBA Hang Time feels like a really solid suggestion. It's comical and fun. I actually like it even more than NBA Jam myself. The timing for releasing the ball when shooting feels better. I find the game's animation to be more impressive, and overall the game just feels like a souped up version of NBA Jam, which would make sense because that's what they were trying to make. The only thing not as good is that the iconic announcer from NBA Jam is gone, which how could you ever top that? The game does have a nice soundtrack though, including this little masterpiece you can hear when going into the game's settings menu. Now everybody sing it with me. Hoo-ow, hoo-ow. Now, I should point out that this game isn't exclusive to N64, it was on PS1 as well, but the N64 version is far more common to find, has less loading, and for gosh sakes, you should give something other than Mario Kart 64 a chance. Oh, and this is also yet another game you can use the D-pad with if you want to, which I would suggest you should want to. Next game up is Star Fox 64. Oh, we've gone into the 3D territory. This is where some people watching start heading for the hills. But wait just a second, it's not so bad, I promise. The thing about Star Fox is that because it's essentially an on-rails shooter, the game is preset in terms of what's going to be coming up on screen next, and I feel this allowed the developers to improve how everything looks. Maybe it won't blow you away, but it at least looks okay, I think, and let's be honest, that's probably not why people are playing N64 these days anyways. That said, what is perhaps hard to look at in this game is Slippy's mumbling little motor mouth, not to mention how it sounds, but this is where I would argue the fun comes in. You can blast them. In fact, you can blast all your cohorts. A little friendly fire never hurt anyone. Oh wait, now you're gone for the mission. And good riddance. The thing is, they are sassy and it can get annoying. Shooting the intended enemies can be fun as well, but I feel like Nintendo knew what they were doing. Players' emotions are going to be all over the place. Let's just let them shoot everything. But as much as the character and personality of the game is very noteworthy and attention-grabbing, the game itself is a really good one, and because there aren't many rail shooters out there, at least compared to other genres, it's one of those genres where fans tend to like every game in the genre. Kinda reminds me of my bread bag clip collecting. My life is easier because I like the white ones. I like how there's different levels and paths through the game you can reach based on different little dipsy-doos and trickety-doo-dahs that you can do in the stages. Figuring these out for yourself or just looking them up can be a lot of fun. Next game on my list is Ogre Battle 64. Definitely not the type of game one would necessarily think of as a stereotypical N64 game. It's a strategy RPG game, and boy, let me tell you, I am a sucker for these types of games. A lot of people who have played N64 at one point or another don't necessarily know about this one, but of the people that do, they are really big on this game. It's fairly easy to get into, utilizing a pretty straightforward formula of move your units to take over various enemy bases and battle enemy units until you can eventually take over their main base. Although each of the missions can certainly vary from one to the next. This game has always reminded me a lot of Dragon Force in many ways, but still different. By the way, Dragon Force is another game not everybody knows about. I actually thought the story was interesting in this one too, which normally isn't a deal breaker for these types of games since the gameplay is what really drives them. I've always been a fan of games that do the whole swords and sorcery theme though, and sometimes I just like to let my hair down and feel like a dork, you know? In all the right ways. And these games do it for me. Ogre Battle makes me think of those old tabletop strategy games, except without the elements that I always found the most annoying, like spending 2 hours explaining all the rules before you can even start. While the strategy RPG genre has certainly been added to in different ways over the years, I'd argue a lot of the ones that came out in the 90s were darn near perfect, and for that reason, they'll be good to go back to. Alrighty, and the last game I'd like to mention is Paper Mario. Something I hear a lot is that people wish the Paper Mario series would go back to its roots. So, just a suggestion, go back to Paper Mario's roots by playing the first game in the series. While the Thousand Year Door gets a lot of attention, deservedly so, I think this game is still pretty darn good itself. Plus, the N64 gets a lot of criticism for not having many RPGs. Some would even tell you it has no RPGs. But here we have two that I've suggested in this video, and it's not like I've gone rogue, these games are well regarded. For those who aren't familiar with the Paper Mario games, besides being a love letter to fans of both Mario and Paper, which is actually a pretty large demographic, what you essentially have is a Mario RPG game where you also have different Mario-type abilities outside of battles, typically inspired by, you guessed it, paper, that you use to navigate the overworld, and doing so is fun. At the beginning, you start with just a few basic abilities. I don't want to spoil too much, but just a quick little peek at later in the game, and yeah, you can do some pretty cool attacks, and the game always has you utilize the controller in an interactive way to increase the effectiveness of your attacks. Keeps things interesting and keeps you more engaged as a player. Really great game in my opinion that I think people looking for something outside of the usual Mario type games will enjoy. Oftentimes people who aren't even fans of RPGs like this game too. And that does it for my 5 games that I wanted to suggest for this video. As you might have noticed, I left off some of the big hitters for the console, not because I personally don't think they'll always be fun, but just because everyone already knows about them, even the haters, and maybe even especially the haters. And like I said before, I was trying to focus on games that I think skeptics of the console might enjoy. But if none of these games resonate, well, at least they can get back to the things they enjoy in life. In any case, let me know how I did. If you've already played some of these games, do you think they're good choices? And if you haven't played some of them, did any of them pique your interest? As always, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video. There are certain phrases that I hear all the time, like, actions speak louder than words, birds of a feather flock together, you're an idiot, and the Sega Dreamcast prematurely died years ago. Hey, we've all said that last one at least once, but if the Dreamcast is so dead, then what do you call this?
When the rhythm starts to play, dance with me, make me sway.
With how many people still play and love the Dreamcast, it doesn't seem very dead to me. That's the thing about cheating death. Find a way to live forever and you'll never die. I figure my YouTube videos will last longer than I will. The world won't remember my tender last moments with my grandma as much as it'll remember this. Not sure how I feel about that, but you gotta give the Dreamcast a lot of credit for having so many games that people still love to play. I mean, just think about how many things have come into existence since the Dreamcast's supposed death that people care far less about. For example, my adult face. Alright, so here's the deal. When it comes to video games, typically the way things work is that the longer a console is on the market, the more good games there are. Talk to the PS2. However, the longer a console is on the market also usually means the more bad games there are. Talk to the PS2 again, which, to be fair, bad games can just be ignored. But with the Dreamcast's short time on the market, it didn't amass a pile of bad games, and yet still had an ample supply of bangers. I've seen the joke made before that the good games for the Dreamcast are all the games. Matter of fact, I've seen myself make that joke before. And while upon closer inspection, you'll inevitably find games like Dragon Riders Chronicles of Pern, not exactly a universally loved game, the point remains that the Dreamcast did a pretty good job of maintaining a high ratio of good games to games available. So by no means are the games I'll be talking about in this video the only games that'll always be fun, or even necessarily my top 5. It's just a handful of games I'd like to highlight at this time. So with that, the first game I'd like to talk about is Confidential Mission. While the Dreamcast is more well known for the excellent House of the Dead 2 when it comes to light gun games, I wanted to talk about Confidential Mission because not as many people do, but I don't talk about things just because nobody else does. Acorn Archimedes fans can feel that one. Confidential Mission is a really fun game. The concept of a light gun game tends to naturally lend itself to fun, but this game was made by one of Sega's best dev teams, known as Hitmaker at the time, and bravo to them for living up to such a name. Labeling yourself as something doesn't always make it true. But because the game was made by one of Sega's best teams, the foundation of the game is solid, and unsurprisingly, the Dreamcast received a very nice port. It's goofy but fun, cheesy, ridiculous enemies and trash talk, awkward dialogue, exactly what you want out of a light gun game. And not only that, but the reason I always feel compelled to recommend this game is because when people decide to invest in a light zapper, often to play House of the Dead 2 on the system, they're looking for an additional reason to make that investment worth it. And I'm here to tell you that Confidential Mission is that reason. Trust me, trying to show it off to your in-laws ain't it. For the next game, we've got Tech Romancer, which at first you might think sounds like some sort of odd romance novel between mechs or something, but nope, these mechs aren't in love with each other here. They want to fight each other, although I suppose people in love do like to fight each other. Why do people do that? Give your sweetie pie some sugar. In any case, you will be in love with the mechs as they are a lot of fun to play with. What makes this game great is that you can button mash if you want to, or you can take the game more seriously and learn all the different moves and form more solid strategies. Kind of like life. Know anybody who button mashes their way through life? Yeah, we all know someone. But however you play it, the game is a spectacle, giving off heavy arcade vibes, which makes sense given it is an arcade game, and just instantly makes my hands feel like I've been eating greasy pizza at a Chuck E. Cheese, but without the grease. Without the pizza too, though, that's kind of sad. There's a lot of mech fighting games out there, but this one has always felt special to me. Being made by Capcom certainly helps, and I think the people who actually bother to give this game a chance will continue to have fun with it for years and years to come. Alright, so at this point we've talked about a lot of different arcade games, something the Dreamcast is celebrated for, often thought of as the last great console that emphasized arcade ports as a main selling point. With that in mind, it's pretty hard to not talk about the Marvel vs. Capcom series. The second game is far more famous due to its massive roster, but I've always been more partial to the first game. I like the visual style a lot better. Going for mostly 2D, I prefer the button layout, which I'm using a Saturn controller via an adapter to play it, and I actually prefer the smaller roster since it feels more curated. In any match, I know I'm going to be getting the characters I care about the most, not this cactus thing. But that's just me. More people will probably prefer the sequel, which is also a ton of fun, but I thought I'd at least make the case for the first game since people tend to just assume they should ignore it in favor of the second. A visual and auditory showcase, and a ton of fun to play. Moving along, we've got another arcade game, Dynamite Cop. I can't help myself but to talk about this game. It's so much fun. There aren't a lot of good 3D beat-em-ups out there, but this is definitely one of them. In fact, it might even be the best one. As was typical of many great Dreamcast games, it's goofy arcade fun that doesn't take itself overly serious. I tell you what though, there are a ton of different moves you can do in this game, to the point you'll need to look up how to do certain things. Oh, sorry, not a fan of reading? No problem, you don't have to. But the fact you can helps illustrate how much depth there is in a game that might be mistaken as not very deep. I love all the different items you can pick up and use as weapons too. Whether it's a bazooka or a baguette, anything can be used to get the job done. Quick little suggestion for you as well. Try intentionally failing some of the command prompt sequences. They're pretty fun to watch. Dynamite Cop is also a perfect game to play with a friend, which, by the way, every game I mention in this video is, and I just love recommending this game. People are always asking about it when I show footage too, so here you go. I figured I'd do my neighborhood a favor as well. Last but not least, we have Samba de Amigo. How could I not mention it? A game that people sleep on far too often for my liking. It's time to wake up and shake some maracas. Or rather, shake your wallet to death until all the dollar bills fall out. The maracas are a bit pricey, but luckily I can tell you that using a controller to play is perfectly enjoyable. I played this way for a long time before I got the maracas and still have no problem going back to this method. It's a fairly straightforward rhythm game where you try to time your inputs that ramps up in difficulty as you work through the game. The version of the game that I prefer is the Japanese Samba 2000 version, which adds more songs, but the regular version still has plenty of fun music on it. I find this is a great game to play with people who don't normally play video games too, due to how light-hearted it is. The music and visuals really carry the game to the point that it could be fun for someone to just watch you play, especially if you're using the maracas. It's just one of those games that makes you feel good. We could all use that, could we not? And that's why I think this game will be a game that will remain enjoyable forever. So there you have it, 5 Dreamcast games that I feel are a pretty surefire way to have a great time. But remember, these are certainly not the only ones for the system, which leads to the perfect opportunity for all of you to recommend the games you probably have on the tips of your tongues, most of which I'll probably agree with since I love the system's library, and a lot of them are on the tip of my tongue too. So with that, feel free to share your responses down below, along with anything else you'd like to say, and I will see ya in the next video. When people think of their time spent with the PlayStation 2, they tend to think of greatness. And why wait for greatness when it's already here? Every time I see somebody complain about how the current PlayStation is lacking in titles compared to the PS2, I always think you can still play the PS2, or can you? Well, I'm here to report that I'm pressing the buttons, I'm looking at what's on screen, and there's a smile on my face. And I know I'm not the only one, so seems like you can. And because the PS2 already did the whole be a good console with good games thing, there's plenty to choose from, in which case, I'd like to make the argument for 5 games that I think are not only still good, but will always be good. And most of the games I'll be talking about are games that don't get much attention, so yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for all the well-known hits like Metal Gear Solid and Kingdom Hearts to be mentioned. Not that those aren't good games, but I wanted to suggest a more personal list of games to all of you. Plus, I suspect my copy of Metal Gear Solid 3 is getting too big of an ego as it is. So with that, let's jump in with Klonoa 2, often regarded as one of the best platformer series that nobody talks about. When it comes to people who do know about it, they like to talk about it, and I'm no different. These games have always reminded me of Nights into Dreams, but apparently the first Klonoa's development began before Nights, despite being released after, and it's been claimed that it wasn't an influence. I remain suspicious though. But regardless of whether it was or not, I think it would appeal to fans of Nights for similar reasons. The game takes place in a very dreamlike, colorful world and has a similar aesthetic, with the main difference being that the game takes the form of a more traditional platformer with a twist. You're pretty much always moving left to right or right to left, but the way the perspective and camera changes always keeps the stage interesting. The boss fights, which you're looking at here, kind of remind me of the boss fights in Nights as well. Very creative, and it's fun to see the way the mechanics of the game are tied into both the viewing perspective as well as how you defeat the boss. Now, while I can recommend the Klonoa games, I can't recommend their prices. That is, not unless you go for the Japanese releases or the Fantasy Reverie release, available on more modern consoles like the PS5 and Switch. Okay, next game I want to talk about is Time Crisis 3, although you certainly can't go wrong with Time Crisis 2 either, which is arguably a more iconic game, but I find myself enjoying Time Crisis 3 a lot, mostly because you can change your weapon as much as you want, so long as you have ammo for it, which you collect as you play. Time Crisis is essentially like the most intense game of peekaboo you've ever played, where you are the peekabooer, but instead of silly faces, you'll be dealing out destruction. Although, you might just be having so much fun that you'll be doing both. My wife remembers overhearing the first time I played this one.
Peekaboo!
The game's cover mechanic is without a doubt the distinguishing mechanic that sets it apart from other light gun games, and certainly what it's known for. You can avoid being hit by staying under cover or by, blasting the enemy before they have a chance to fire at you. Getting in and out of cover is controlled by a button on the bottom of the GunCon 2, something that can be a hassle to set up due to the cords it requires, though it does provide highly accurate results. That said, if you want something that feels more like the arcade, which used a foot pedal, you can just stick a controller on the ground and pressing any button will serve as the getting in and out of cover function. So long as you don't mind putting your nasty foot on a controller, but hey, that's what the Mad Catz controller you make your friend play with is for. You can also, of course, use a regular controller to play the actual game with instead of the light gun. Some might say it's not the same experience as the GunCon, but I'd say it's still fun and you can always get the GunCon 2 for it later. I don't know though, I still think there was a missed opportunity for the game's marketing team. Next game up is one that almost nobody would have guessed because almost nobody's ever heard of it, and that would be the amazing shoot 'em up by famed developer Cave, Espgaluda, and while its sequel as well as the game it's a spin-off to are more easily obtained on newer consoles, as of this video, this one only ever got a port on the good old PS2, and was only ever released in Japan because, yeah, just look at it, it's a pretty Japanese game, and US marketing didn't always know how to localize shoot 'em ups. So here you have a game in a genre, specifically bullet hell shoot 'em ups, that most people ignore, that was only released in Japan, and to make things even more unconventional, I'm playing it with my TV rotated onto its side to get the full resolution, trust me, it's a thing, and with an oddball controller, a Saturn controller made for PS2. But as weird as all these circumstances are, and as much as this could be seen as a recommendation to ignore from a weird guy who does weird things, the game is actually incredibly beginner-friendly and probably the best recommendation I could give as a bullet hell shoot 'em up for beginners, a genre that scares a lot of people. From what I understand, the developers actually intended this game to be a way for people to get used to the genre, a genre that requires mental toughness to be sure. What I used to do to prepare for these types of games is think about all my life's failures. The main mechanic this game has that sets it apart and makes it so beginner-friendly is that you can actually slow down time, not indefinitely, but enough to help yourself out for the trickier parts. It's also tied into the game's scoring, with you receiving extra points for any bullets remaining on screen when you defeat an enemy while in the slow motion mode, which oftentimes lines up with the trickier parts of the game anyways, so it's a very clever and well implemented mechanic if you ask me, making the game great whether you're playing purely for survival or for score. Plus, just look at it. I've always loved how colorful these games are. This game is a ton of fun to play, and I think it'll stand the test of time well due to the way it caters towards those getting into the genre. Alright, but after a game most of you probably haven't heard of, let's move to the game on my list that you would all be most likely to have heard of. Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. Extra points for the silly name, but there's still a chance some of you aren't familiar with this game, as the Ratchet and Clank and the Jak and Daxter games tended to get more publicity. I've always liked the Sly Cooper games the most, though. The first game in the series here is just a good old-fashioned platformer with set get from point A to point B levels to make your way through, with a little bit of a twist in that you can be sneaky at times, with stealth mechanics integrated into parts of the levels, creative levels that is. I tell ya, if Super Mario Bros. Wonder has taught us anything, besides that I wish more of my favorite characters would turn into elephants, it's that platformers thrive by constantly throwing stages at you that each have something different and unique going for them. And I feel Sly Cooper excels at this. The way Sly moves around gives a distinct quality to the game as well. You feel like a sneaky raccoon. Ever since I was charged by a pack of raccoons during a late night walk, I find I have a healthy respect for raccoons and can appreciate the way they move. For the final game on my list, we have Maximo Ghosts to Glory, an often forgotten game in the Ghosts and Goblins series lineage, being sort of an offshoot game. What I like about this game is that, similar to the Ghosts and Goblins games, it has an arcade feel to the game structure and design. Of course, that also means the game is very difficult, but I like the challenge. In fact, this game might be enjoyable for me forever because I'll be trying to actually beat it forever. Wouldn't be the first thing that's whooped my butt sideways countless times, and yet I keep coming back to it. For example, life. I don't mind having a good challenge sitting on my shelf, though. What I mind is when games waste my time with a lot of superfluous stuff on the side or in between the good parts, but not here, just a very tightly packed game that will keep you engaged. But there we have it for my list of games. Of course, these are certainly not the only games that will always be enjoyable on the PS2. These are just the ones that I wanted to highlight that I don't see much coverage of. Doesn't mean I wouldn't love to hear which games all of you want to highlight, though. So with that, let me know which games you would choose in addition to what you think of the ones I chose. I'm looking forward to reading your comments as always, and I will see ya in the next video. Also, you still haven't finished Okami yet, have ya? The Nintendo GameCube is one of those consoles that always makes me think, gosh dog it, this is fun. Every time I play it can be hard to stop. I play this console in my dreams. Makes for much better dreams than the usual lineup. The concept behind this console is brilliant. Nintendo thought, well, people like games and people like cubes, so let's make a cube that plays games. And yet, it didn't sell well. Maybe should have gone with an even more beloved shape? Well, as it turns out, Nintendo was suffering from a people don't think we're cool problem at the time, something I'm sure a lot of us can probably relate to. Back in the early 2000s, when the GameCube made its initial run, this was how real people lived their lives, watching movies and playing games on your PlayStation 2. A dominant force, and for many, the de facto console that you would buy if you were going to buy a console at a time where it was still very common to only own a single console. Playing the GameCube was, as I remember reading and being told at the time, for losers. So naturally, I bought one. And hey, that's what the handle on the back is for, to smack away all the haters. Who wants to come over and tell me they hate the GameCube? But as the years have gone by, it's been a joy, an honor, and a triumph to see the GameCube rise in the ranks of public perception. Now being pretty well respected from where I see it, compared to how it used to be regarded. Sure, there's still people who don't like it. As with anything, there's people who don't like the color blue. Why? Now, as many of you are well aware by now, the GameCube's surge in popularity has certainly been noticed by gamers alike, with the prices of physical copies for collectors spiking up, something which, as gamers like to say, sucks. I would even go so far as to say that the GameCube is more popular than both of the consoles that came immediately after it, the Wii and the Wii U. And yeah, the Wii can play GameCube games, but we're talking about game libraries here. Unfortunately, as of this video's upload date, besides re-releases, there really aren't a lot of ways to play GameCube games outside of the original copies. That said, I don't expect that to always be the case. I think much like the Nintendo and Super Nintendo have had a good run of their games being available to play via a Nintendo online service, this will be the case for GameCube games as well. It seems like even the generations who grew up with the Wii and Wii U still have a fondness for GameCube games, let alone the generation that actually did grow up with the GameCube. So, call it a hunch, but I think it'll be around. And remember, for these lists I do of games that will always be fun, these are not the only games, or even my top 5. So just because I don't mention my favorite game, Pikmin, actually I just did, so never mind. In any case, these are just a handful of games that I have particular reasons for why I think they'll endure, as well as games that I think would stand a good chance of selling newcomers to the system. So with that, first up, the Super Monkey Ball games, but I'll focus on the second one. This generation of video games isn't really known for having arcade games, but leave it to good old Sega to provide us with this little treat. This game knows how to have fun. I mean, it's got bananas. And in typical arcade fashion, the gameplay is the emphasis here. True to form, the story is just there to give some context and can be easily skipped. Although, I gotta say, with the main character, I never have I identified more with the character. I feel like I just gets me, you know? What makes this version of the game stick out to me is the use of the GameCube's analog stick, which you actually can use with the Switch version as well, but I, like many, find the GameCube's analog stick to really shine with this game as you try to make your way to each stage's end gate. And don't let these early stages fool you. The game requires a ton of precision. Every little bit counts, so having an analog stick that you love is going to make a difference. And if you're like a lot of other people, you will love how in control of your monkey in a ball you will feel with this analog stick. Oh, and for anybody wondering, yes, you can roll around inside of a ball in real life. It's called zorbing. But I did it on the water one time and found it's a one-way ticket to claustrophobia in Barf City. What's interesting is that by moving the analog stick, stick, you might intuitively think that you are controlling the actual monkey and its ball, but you're actually rotating the stage itself. In practice, it can feel the same, but there are some instances where it's helpful to know that, and I think it contributes to the physics working as well as they do. Naturally, the success of the first two Monkey Ball games led to more sequels, but many regard the first two games as the best ones, and probably because they pretty much nailed it, so could be the go-to Monkey Ball games for quite some time. Oh, and I just remembered that it gets even sweeter. This game has some amazing party games for multiplayer. Both Monkey games do, utilizing the whole cast of monkeys. So it's a far more robust package than you might have thought. Oh, and I've got one last tip. Because you can play the game with just a single hand on the analog stick, I'm not saying you have to, but you can use the other hand to chomp on a nanner for the complete experience. Okay, for the next game we have Paper Mario the 1000 Years. Wait, hold on, that's not quite right. Paper Mario, the one people really like and wish would get a proper follow-up. Not that people don't love some of those follow-ups for what they are, but since you can't play the follow-up you may have wanted, you can always play this, especially if you never have. And if you have, you can play it again now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The dialogue is awfully silly in this game and chock full of Nintendo-flavored tomfoolery, making it an entertaining game to go back to or forward to from the previous game on Nintendo 64, which is pretty good as well. If you're not familiar with the games, they're like an RPG mixed with a side-scrolling platformer, sort of. The games are known for being very user-friendly, easy to play, and some of the first games to be recommended for getting into RPGs. Heck, some people don't like RPGs, but do like these games. Fans of Mario games, of which I've been told there are many, might dig this game too, just for the fact it is a Mario game. It takes a different turn from the typical Mario universe and sequence of events, offering a unique story, the type of story you could curl up with like a good book. Remember, the GameCube tended to have some of the more unusual entries in their respective series, which makes them stand out over time and give them more of a, oh yeah, I remember that one reputation. Next game on the list is Mario Kart Double Dash. Oh yeah, I remember that one. See, I told ya. What makes Double Dash stick out is the fact you can load two racers into the same kart. So while some may view certain Mario Kart games as iterative and easily surpassed, aka Mario Kart 8 is the best, so don't bother with the rest. Double Dash keeps people interested because of the two racers per kart setup. You can stick a friend in the same kart with you, or just play by yourself and control both racers in your kart at the same time. Or try playing two players in one kart and control both controllers. Not recommended. I gotta say though, it feels inevitable that Nintendo will eventually add the two racers per kart back into a game at some point. Depending when you watch this, maybe they already have. But still, Double Dash was built around this feature and will always be fun, regardless of whether or not it gets reintroduced. The next GameCube game that falls into the weird but endeared category would be Super Mario Sunshine, for fans who had been banging on Nintendo's door for a game where Mario goes on vacation. Their game had finally arrived. Mario just wants to eat fish. But we need a fun game to play, so sorry buddy. For many people, they identify this game as the one where Mario has a water pack, and as a fan of both Mario and water blasters, this game is right up my alley. It's different enough that I feel it will continue to stick out for years to come. There simply isn't a Mario game quite like this one, and yet, it still has a lot of the things people love from other games in the series. What I've always loved about it is all the crazy acrobatic moves you can do with Mario. It's like they took the maneuverability of Mario from Super Mario 64 and combined it with a water pack. And that's because they did. This is one of the few games I have fun just messing around in, paying no mind to the objectives at hand. Not that the objectives aren't fun as well, in fact, they're a lot of fun. Quick little story for you. I picked this game back up about a year ago just to mess around in it for a while, ended up playing through the whole game, and don't worry, didn't have to pull an all-nighter either, got plenty of sleep. The last game I'd like to talk about is Viewtiful Joe, made by Clover Studio, who were basically one of Capcom's development teams who were allowed to make more unconventional games. Unfortunately, sales of their games weren't as high as was hoped for, kind of like the GameCube itself, at least these two like each other. Besides a cool cel-shaded visual style, the game was a side-scrolling beat-em-up platformer of sorts. Very much in line with what fans of retro games are into. To make things even more unique, the game also featured a mechanic where you can both speed time up as well as slow it down. Gosh, that'd be nice to do in real life. Okay, so quick rundown here. Cool visuals, cool concept, unique gameplay. Why didn't more people buy this game? I even remember people back in the day acknowledging these things. Yeah, looks good and sounds cool, but I don't know, I think I'll pass. But wait a second, I'm pretty sure I did that too. Well, I'm an idiot. It's got an interesting plot too, where a kid gets absorbed into the movie he's watching and becomes a superhero. Kind of reminds me of the premise of Comic Zone, except it's a comic in that, but also a very unique game. But anyways, Viewtiful Joe. People are going to care about this game for a while. As for some of the sequels, like Red Hot Rumble and Double Trouble, well, we'll see, I guess. Oh, and for goodness sake, remember to not select what's called the adult's difficulty. I'm telling you, even people who can beat NES Battletoads will tell you it is not horsing around. And there's a good chance you'll end up just changing the difficulty to the kids setting anyways. But there we have it for the 5 games that I wanted to highlight. Remember, this is not an exhaustive list. There's plenty more games for the GameCube that I'd agree will always be fun. If there's a game you love, odds are I agree. Otherwise, I wouldn't own a lot of them. That said, I would love to hear which ones you feel are good choices, and of course, why. So with that, leave your response down below, and I will see ya in the next video. Video games. There are so many video games, and just when you thought there couldn't be any more of them, you remember there's also handheld games. As great as our traditional home consoles are, they're still limited in certain ways, and in ways that handheld gaming can come to the rescue. That said, with the popularity of the Switch, fusing the two together, the divide between them is becoming less and less. Mostly gone are the days of games being made just for handhelds. And as much as there are benefits to this, with companies being able to consolidate their development resources, it does mean that the unique feel of handheld-only games will become a thing of the past. But lucky for us, we're retro gamers. Hanging on to things from the past is what we do. Games, consoles, poor life decisions. Actually, that one's not required, but well, we'll just toss it in as a bonus. Plus, we all know the only truly poor life decision is to stop playing video games, am I right? Now, the awkward thing is that throughout the life of handheld games, being a handheld-only game was sometimes used as an insult, with the implication being that it was made with a smaller budget or by a company's secondary development team, with the silver lining being that you sometimes got more experimental, interesting ideas, or games that harken back to the games of older times, kind of like how indie games do. In fact, it could be argued that the spirit of handheld exclusive games lives on through indie games as well as lower budget games that do still get made. Regardless, there are people who view the handheld exclusive games of old to be lesser, and have even made the decision to ignore handheld gaming entirely. This divide has even caused some handhelds to develop an inferiority complex. I can't tell you the number of times I go to play my Super Nintendo and find this when I know I'd left Contra 3 in there last I played. Come to think of it, I don't know where my copy of Contra 3 is. But whatever your feelings on handheld games might be, there are no doubt a lot of handheld games loved by passionate gamers alike. So, as we enter a time when handheld-only games might be a thing of the past, I thought I'd share 5 games for our beloved handhelds that I feel will always be enjoyable as we head into the future. The first game is Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, a game from the past with a story that takes place in the future, and known by many as the best game that's like Symphony of the Night, but not Symphony of the Night. Like Plantains, the best nanner that isn't a nanner, but actually is still a type of nanner. As somebody who prefers the more classic Castlevania games as opposed to the more exploration-based games like these ones, I'd consider myself a little picky, but I definitely love this one. The issue I typically have with games that emphasize exploration is that there is too much wandering around in between the points of interest. You know, the good stuff. But I'm happy to say that Aria of Sorrow is packed full of interesting enemies, cool bosses, and new areas to discover. Tying it all together is the abundance, and I mean abundance, of abilities you have access to. Just look at them all. It's really fun to play around with the different possibilities and see what new ones you can find as you reach different parts of the game and face new enemies. Although, admittedly, you may end up just sticking to the ones that work best. There's a lot of different fruits to try out too. Besides that, the story is about what you'd come to expect, but this time in the future because, well, the series likes to bounce around to different times, and they were probably due. It's not like the game takes place in outer space or something, though. It still has a very typical Castlevania-type setting. And if you're wondering, in this footage here, I'm playing as Julius, an alternate character once you beat the game. He's got a whip and a couple other unique abilities, but lacks a lot of the abilities you get with Soma, so you might have a preference for who you'd like to play as. Okay, next game on my list would be Advance Wars, and while it could be the first one, I'm choosing the second one. This series has roots on home consoles with what was called Famicom Wars in Japan, but in the United States, Advance Wars is very much a series that people associate with handhelds. It's always stood out to me as a perfect handheld game because of the way you can suspend a battle at any point, making it really easy to play in bits when you're busy on the go, you know? Or not. Fun fact for ya, I was ready to play some Super Mario Wonder on launch day, but instead felt the urge to play this, so I took a little cheat day for myself, aka every day, because you should play what you want. Super Mario Wonder could wait and was just as fun to play the month after. Advance Wars has that sort of addictive quality to it. It's easy to get into. Just take over buildings, accumulate money to purchase new units, and utilize the units to conquer the opposition, with each battle bringing a new scenario and a new game plan for you to come up with. The game hooks you. Really, it is addicting, but not addicting in a please help me, I feel gross type of way. Addicting in more of a, yeah, I'm thinking about playing this even at times during the day when I'm not. Hey, you could actually just be playing now. It's a handheld game. Next game is A Link Between Worlds. You know, sometimes people will say that Ocarina of Time is like a 3D version of A Link to the Past, but this game is even more so like a 3D version of A Link to the Past. And on top of that, it's in 3D, stereoscopic 3D that is, in addition to using 3D models instead of 2D sprites. Now, I wouldn't say that the 3D necessarily makes the game great compared to the 2D sprite work in A Link to the Past. What makes the game great is that it's a top-down style Zelda game that follows in the footsteps of A Link to the Past, which are good footsteps to follow. That's really all you need to sell most people on giving this game a go, if that is indeed a selling point. But if you're looking for another selling point, I think the stereoscopic 3D that the game utilizes is a big plus. In fact, as somebody who is generally not a fan of 3D, I think the 3D on the 3DS is really good. If you have the questionably named new 3DS that works a lot better than the original. And yeah, I know it's annoying to be recommending additional hardware if you don't already have it, but the newer model works a lot better due to the way it tracks your eyeballs. It's really impressive how well it works, and believe me, I know all about things tracking my eyeballs. You can't see the 3D effect on camera, of course. I don't even have it turned on. It needs eyeballs. Hey, maybe that would have been a better name for it. But even if you don't have the new 3DS or prefer to keep 3D turned off, most importantly, this is still a great Zelda game, hitting a lot of the same beats that make A Link to the Past great, with some added mechanics, most notably the ability to become a painting and move along walls and through cracks. If I'm being honest, I don't remember exactly what the story was, but I do remember that I enjoyed it. Hey, this game came out over a decade ago. Feels like it was just yesterday. And yep, with a comment like that, I'm definitely on the hot route to geezerhood. All right. Next game on the list is Donkey Kong 94, also known as Donkey Kong, the one on Game Boy, or Donkey Kong, that game is amazing. I've always loved the original Donkey Kong arcade game that inspired it, and this game feels like a more fleshed out version of it, with the main thing being that there are a ton more stages. The original arcade game just had 4 different screens, which makes sense, seeing as it was designed around making runs for high scores, but this game plays different as it's more about making your way through all the different stages. It has 9 different worlds, each with a good amount of unique levels to play through. I've even heard some people say that this game might be too long, not something you hear said often about an original Game Boy game. Add it to the list. But because none of the game feels like filler, I'd say that its long length is acceptable. In fact, it's great. Alright, and for the final game on my list, we have Cat Trap. I love bananas, but I love this game just as much. Yeah, we're getting real serious here. Now, I've talked about this game in detail before, but considering almost nobody else ever talks about it, I'd say I'm in the clear to talk about it as much as I want. I mean, technically, this is my channel. I can do what I want. And see, I just did that and got away with it. What makes Cat Trap so satisfying to play is the way it makes you use your brain. To which you might be thinking, whoa, I don't always like to use that while playing games. I hear ya, and there's games for those occasions as well, but this game belongs in a category I like to call joyful brain use. Each time you pass a stage, you feel smart, and everyone likes to feel smart sometimes. In each stage, you're trying to reach all the enemies. Reaching them automatically triggers a kick your butt off the screen animation, but actually reaching them is where the puzzle element comes into play. There's a handful of basic mechanics you have to work with, including navigating ladders, removing sand, I think it's sand, and pushing blocks. The rest is up to you and your brain, so make sure you and your brain are getting along when you play this. The game could be described as a puzzle platformer, and oddly shares a bit of resemblance to the highly acclaimed game Braid, with the main similarity being that you can rewind time at any point as you're trying to solve the stages. Who here remembers Braid? But unlike Braid, this game doesn't make me want to smash my controller into the wall. Good thing too, because smashing a Game Boy is kind of sad. The thing is an icon. Another nice feature of Cat Trap is that you can play the stages in any order you want. All 99 of them before unlocking the final stage. So if you want to start with stage 99, you can. I wouldn't recommend it because you'll get your butt whooped, but a high chance of getting your butt whooped doesn't stop people from doing a lot of things. For example, life. The game also utilizes a very simple, thank goodness, password system to keep track of which stages you've completed. Can't recommend this game enough. I'm crazy for it. But there we have it. My choices for 5 handheld games that I believe will always be fun, which are by no means the only 5. And you know, what's nice about handheld games is that not only can you take them with you on the go, but what I feel like a lot of people realized with the Switch is that it's nice even just for moving around within your home to play wherever you want. Because why play in your go-to comfortable couch when you can not? Or, you know, in a different comfortable spot. All that said, I would of course be curious which games you would choose as your favorite handheld games that you can see yourself playing for years into the future. I always like to see which games will get recommended by multiple people. There's always games that are. You think alike and think well is what I'd chalk it up to. So with that, leave your choices and any other thoughts you may have down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah. And he's talking about video games. He's